Well, hello there. Today, we're going to talk about guilt. Guilt, feeling bad, heavy feeling in your chest. I'm Jeffrey, and my question for you is how much of your life is motivated by guilt? How much of what you do is trying to avoid feeling bad, or because you do feel bad, or because you think you might feel guilty? Is it 98% of the things you do? 98 and a half? 100% of the things you do? We're going to talk about it today, and we're going to get ourselves up and out of guilt because you don't deserve to feel that way. And I'm going to make a very, very, very definitive / controversial, perhaps, statement. Guilt is 100% completely useless in every situation. I will explain because I'm sure you are thinking of several people who could use some guilt in their lives. I will explain what I mean when I say guilt is useless. But first, welcome. This is the Jeffrey Marsh podcast. I am Jeffrey Marsh. I'm an activist, I'm an author, I'm famous on the TikToks with billions of views. And if you like what I do, if you like this safe place, please subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to your podcasts. We shall be there. And if you happen to be on YouTube, share the video with a friend, comment, you know the ways to support. And I love you for it. Why make a podcast, Jeffrey? I've been going through the motivations and the focus for myself. Uh, going through. This is the second episode, so I also did it in episode 1. This is episode 2. And I want to go over it again because I had a hard time finding a podcast that was a safe place, that was an inclusive place, that was lovely, that made me feel like I hated myself less by the end of the podcast, and that also gave me practical, useful tips and hints for living a perfectly beautiful, less hate-filled life. And I really had honestly, me, Jeffrey, I had a hard time finding that podcast to listen to. There are some out there, but I decided to make one so that I could offer that and be that change that I wanted to see in the world. And that's this, the Jeffrey Marsh podcast, a place for the innocents, a place for the sensitive, a place for the people who feel so much and the people who care. And today, perhaps for the people that feel guilty. Guilt is a kind of currency. For some people that you might have been raised by, for some people, guilt is a currency. If you do this, I will assist you in not feeling guilty. It's an exchange. It's a way to motivate behavior. And it works for most of us, for most of our lives. If you show up for Thanksgiving, I won't make you feel guilty. And we show up. There we are. We bring the yams. We show up early. We leave late. We tolerate our relatives saying things that make us feel awful in a different way. That's not guilt. We are the ones who care, and people take advantage of that by trying to motivate us to behave in certain ways using guilt. It can act as a currency. And I want to help you to recognize those situations especially, but any situation where guilt may come up, and help you to come out of it, help you to discharge it, help you to choose something else for yourself. Why is this important? mostly because you don't deserve guilt. You don't deserve to feel bad. I will do a separate issue about shame, and to me, shame is a different subject. To me, guilt is about other people and feeling like you did something to other people or that other people might be affected. Shame is much more a personal, in your house, in your mind thing. To me, shame is like, I am bad. And guilt to me is more like, I have affected other people and so I should feel a certain way. They're very closely related and they can be sisters and twins. Yeah. They can be together, right? They can happen interchangeably sometimes in some people's lives. But to me, guilt is something very, very specific. And so, with the definition of guilt, I want to come back to the idea that this episode is deeply important to you if you're someone who cares a lot. Because we often think that the answer is to care less. I wouldn't feel so guilty and bad if I just cared less about them. I mean, they're manipulating me. It becomes an us and them thing. And you want to push them away so that you don't feel guilty. But really, I want to encourage you, this is going to sound so weird, but it's me. I want to encourage you to care more. I want to encourage you to be more sensitive and find tools and ways to work within your caring and within your sensitivity to have a better life and to be the beautiful, blossoming, gorgeous, caring person that you have always been, and to be that way without guilt. That's what I'm about. And again, I'll reiterate my statement, guilt is never useful, period. Now, what is useful is compassion for another human being. Sometimes we do things that do genuinely hurt other people. And to me, guilt is not effective, is not useful in that situation. What is useful is having an open heart of compassion for what we have done. That, to me, motivates a person to change. Seeing how you have negatively affected someone else by your actions is a huge motivation to learn new actions. To me, guilt, feeling bad, that sense of self-hate coming into the process is completely useless, period. This is my this is my whole reason for being on the earth, right? Guilt, self-hate, the guilt part is completely useless, and I'm going to prove it to you. You may know, by way of a personal story, that I am not in contact with my mother at all. And I've talked about this in videos, and I actually don't wish her any ill will, but it was dicey there for a while. Meaning when I decided to go no contact, it was waves and waves of guilt. And in my experience, just my opinion, my way of seeing things, she was very talented at maximizing that guilt. Making me feel like I was the most doing all she could to make me feel like I was the most horrible person on earth to go no contact. And this was years ago, and I am still no contact. And to be honest, it feels like one of the most healthy choices I've made in my life. And one of the most important choices I've made in my life. Because the relationship was so triggering into guilt. Because it was not, to me, a clean relationship. Because it was the healthiest thing for both of us. I like you because you're honest. And getting rid of guilt and coming out of guilt is going to have to involve a lot of truth telling on your part. You're going to have to say no. You're going to have to say, if you did something that you would like to apologize for, you're going to have to say, I'm sorry, without guilt, which is a whole skill set in itself. And you're going to have to tell the truth to yourself. We're going to get into this a little bit, but guilt tells us stories, and you're going to have to be able to counter program that with the truth. You're going to have to be such a truth teller that you tell the truth to yourself. That's what you deserve. And to be frank, that's who you are. We're going to take a breath of about 3 seconds, just a pause, so that you can let what's happened in the podcast so far settle with you, and so that you can tell yourself something kind in the break. And when we get back from the break, we're going to talk about my 6-step plan to get you out of guilt. So this is not just general hot tips. This is do them in order, please, when you are feeling guilty, so that you can go from guilty, feeling bad, feeling down, to up, to light, to a beacon in the earth, to a lighthouse of the universe, so that you can go through the steps to become the full, loving, kind human being you always have been without the guilt. That's next. Let's take a breath and tell ourselves something kind. I'll be back in 3 seconds. I hope that felt good. I hope you said something nice that you actually needed to hear from yourself. I've already said several times, you're amazing. But the reason I do this work is because you are amazing people and because you deserve to live without guilt, in my mind. And because guilt is so useless, but it's also a deeply ingrained habit. I was joking at the top of the show, 99% of your life, 100%, 98% of your life driven by guilt. But for a lot of people, it is actually that high. It is actually like, will I get out of bed this morning? Oh, if I don't, I'll feel guilty. And then you get out of bed, right? And that just starts the whole day of motivating. Guilt, 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 guilt in every single decision and every interaction. And I want to help you pull out of that with 6 steps in order to ditch guilt, to climb out of guilt. So if you notice you are in guilt, which, everything I do is everything I say is something I want to hear, right? So I am speaking from experience. It's not anymore. I had to break the habit of guilt for myself. And I want you to be able to do that too. So here are the 6 steps, right? I'm not like guru place of like, I know everything and I'm fully formed, right? That's not what we do here. It's the steps to get you out of guilt that I have applied in real life that have worked for me. That's what we're doing here. So, step number 1, acknowledge and don't hide. Guilt operates best in the shadows. So, even saying this is step number 1 of 6, even saying to yourself, I'm operating out of guilt again. I have that feeling in my chest, that heart feeling of like pressure. I'm feeling guilty again. I'm getting heavy because I feel guilty. So classic example would be an email comes in asking you to volunteer for something. And you're like, I don't want to. I don't have time. But then the guilty feelings come. You're like, but you should say yes. You should click yes. You should be the first one to write back. You should be the one that shows up early and stays late. You should be, because you will feel guilty if not. Because, oh, it's a good cause, and oh, these are good people, and on, right? But if you acknowledge, oh, I'm operating in guilt, that is the first step. The awareness of it is the first step. Because again, guilt wants to operate in the shadows. Guilt wants to operate as the truth of everything that runs your entire life without you ever realizing that there may be a different truth somewhere else. And acknowledging it oh, this is guilt, is your first step to letting it go and healing it and undermining it. And that may be the most important step, honestly. So, number 2 is what I hinted at before. Guilt talks to us. It's sort of been the theme of our episode so far. Guilt speaks to us in words and language. So there have been studies, and there are people on Earth who do not have an inner voice of any kind. It's very, very, much, much less than 1% of the population, but they just do not have an inner voice at all. And if that's you, that sounds interesting, and I'd love to talk to you about it sometime. This, though, is for the people that have that. The email comes in and the voice starts up, you should do this. Oh gosh, you're a bad person if you don't do this. What will they think? They'll be let down. This is such a good cause. All of those arguments, guilt speaks to us. So the second step after realizing that you are in guilt is to listen to what the guilt is telling you. What is the narrative for the guilt? Guilt often hooks into what we've been taught our whole lives. So there may be beliefs and assumptions about how you should be as a person, how you should operate, what you should and shouldn't do. Guilt hooks onto those things and brings that heavy feeling. Brings that, I'm going to hurt other people if I don't. I mean, this is not what the episode's about, but I'm going to hurt other people and then they'll reject me, right? Is often what's under guilt. And you don't want to be rejected, so you feel guilty, and so you do the thing. Listen to what guilt is saying. And if you can, just begin lightly to fact check. Is that true? Who says? Really? What if I want to test that? Stuff like that. All in number 2. Listen to what the guilt is telling you. Number 3, this is a very Jeffrey thing to say, compassion over criticism. So we are not doing a process of feeling guilty about feeling guilty. About feeling guilty, about feeling guilty, about feeling guilty. That is not the thing that we're doing. We are enjoying our lives. We are giving compassion to ourselves and others. Now, I haven't mentioned yet whether this is about something, you can feel guilt for something that actually happened, that you may actually want to repair, that you may actually have done that you wish you hadn't. Or you can feel guilt over nothingness. And they kind of all get mixed together. And in this compassionate approach, if you approach yourself like you would a best friend with kindness and compassion, step number 3, give yourself love, give yourself forgiveness, give yourself kindness. If you do that, you can begin to really discern the difference. And neither are a reason to feel bad. Neither are a reason to feel like true guilt, because there is no such thing to me. Compassion, 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 layering compassion, giving yourself compassion is step number 3, and it's not something you can skip. Step number 4 is to actively change the narrative of guilt. So, I mentioned rejection before. Guilt will often hook into an idea that if you don't do such and such, people will be sad and disappointed, and what's underneath that is people will be upset with you and think you're a jerk and reject you. Almost none of that's true. So you have to go through compassion first and being kind to yourself and loving yourself regardless. You have to get that skill in place first. And it can be a lifelong process, but you have to go through that first, in my experience, before you get to the spot where you begin to reframe guilt's story. And the email is the perfect example. Oh, can you come to this thing that you won't be paid for? It's at your job, but it's like a meeting after, and you won't be paid for it, but it's really important. And you don't want to do it, and you feel guilty for saying no. Okay, because you might be afraid that if you say no, people will think you're a jerk and not a team player, big quotes, around that, and they'll reject you. And you're seeing all these layers and you're seeing the narrative of guilt. You can begin to reframe that into something true. People have agency, and if they think you're a jerk, that is their problem. Okay, that's something that's universally true. That's something they need to work through. If they think you're a jerk for saying no to doing all the things, to volunteering extra time, right? To doing something that might be guilt-inducing. That's a universal truth. You can also tell yourself the truth in another way that, if people reject you, I will still be here with you. Talk to yourself as if you're two people, right? Mentor yourself. I'll still be with you. I'll still love you. I think it's necessary when you're reframing to purely and cleanly tell the truth. You could also say something like, I know in my heart of hearts that this job is not important enough to me, that if they rejected me wholesale and fired me and never wanted to speak to me again, that would be such a bad thing. Find the truth in the situation and begin to reframe what guilt is telling you into the actual narrative of what's going on. That is step number 4. Number 5 is about looking forward. So I don't want to do the thing. I don't want to volunteer this time. I got to use that time for me. I got to spend that time for me. It's going to be too much. I don't want to do it. You make the decision to not do it. Step number 5 is move on. Look forward. Channel that energy into your mission in life, into your art, into what you want to do, into your relationships, into your sense of belonging, into your sense of kindness and what you offer to the human race. So you say no to doing that, and you immediately begin a new project that is going to help you feel fulfilled and kind. You immediately reach out to a friend and say, can we schedule coffee for tomorrow? I love seeing you. You look forward into your life and begin to direct, as best as you can, your own life with your own agency into a place of belonging. So, in other words, you need to act out the change, the reframing of the narrative. You notice what guilt is telling you. You layer on compassion. Going all the way back. You say, I'm in guilt. You notice what guilt is telling you. You pour compassion completely all over yourself in just a completely unconditional way. And then you begin to reframe what guilt has told you. And then you look forward and channel your time and energy into the life that you want. You make choices that have to do with your agency, your belonging, your place in the world, and what you offer the world. Incidentally, this is the step where, if you feel like something has happened where there needs to be an apology, you can apologize from that place. In other words, moving forward can look like admitting to the other person that wasn't the best thing to do, and I am very sorry, and I would like to repair it as best as we can. If you decide that that's worth it to you, and if you decide that there has actually been something to apologize for, and that seems appropriate, that's where it would go. Because number 6 is my favorite. Ritualize your realizations. So in addition to moving forward, you're going to have to, and this is your assignment, you're going to have some kind of ceremony, some kind of special event, some kind of special meal. It can be big, it can be small. The ritual can be big or small, but you've got to have a ritual to close out the guilt the guilt inducement, the things you've seen, the things you've learned, the things you love. You have got to be able to move on. And putting a pin in the end, putting a ritual in the end. One time long ago, I married myself. Talk about a ritual, right? You're going to have some ceremony, some moment where you consciously create a doorway into the I'm not dealing with this anymore. And you walk through the doorway. And that can look like a work of art. It can look like space to yourself. It can look like a walk. It can look like baking your favorite thing. It can look like almost anything as long as you are conscious that that is your ritual. Ritual of closure for the guilt. Ritual of goodbye for the guilt. And we didn't even talk about it, but you may experience grieving when you give up guilt because it's such a part of your life. Maybe I'll do an episode about that some other time. We're going to take another break. We're going to take a breath. I almost said 3 breaths. We're going to take 3 seconds and a breath so that you can tell yourself something kind. And then we will be back to close things out, and I'll give you some lovely words of encouragement. Please take a moment to honor yourself and to be kind to yourself. I'll see you in a moment. Here we go. I hope you're loving yourself. Oh my gosh, I'm so innocent. I love it. I love that I'm so innocent. Okay, thank you. Without you, I wouldn't do this. That's not the way I intended to say without you, I couldn't do this, but I also wouldn't do this. You are so important to me, and your kindness and feedback is so important to me. If you have things to say about guilt, email to me, hello@jeffreymarsh.com, and I will read those in the next episode. Thanks for your love. Thanks for who you are. And thanks for being willing to climb out of guilt, because it's going to make you a bastion. I said lighthouse earlier. It's going to make you an example for people who are under guilt, for people who are suffering needlessly under the currency that is guilt. So I encourage you to ditch it as soon as possible, to let go as soon as possible, and to join the land of truth, the land of kindness, the land of love, the land of being good to yourself, as soon as you possibly can. Wherever you are listening, so thank you. Gratitude is really a part of everything we do, and I'm grateful for you. So wherever you are listening to this podcast, rating it actually helps the podcast be seen by more people. And it's actually a way that you can support me and people like me without spending a dime. A really inclusive way is to rate, to comment. If you want to spend a dime, you're welcome to buy both of my books, How to Be You and Take Your Own Advice. I do talk about guilt in both of them. And last but not least, keep in touch. There's the newsletter on my website that I write every week and sometimes send more than one a week. And there's writing in, again, hello@jeffreymarsh.com. There's subscribing, clicking that, follow or plus or whatever is the app where you're listening, whatever their vibe is. And if you'd like to coach with me, I'd like you to seriously consider it. You do apply for it, and it is popular, but I have place in the schedule for onboarding, and we're in that place now. So if you would like to coach with me, that information's on my website. Keep a nice heart. Keep a beautiful heart. Keep an open heart. And please care more. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye. Oh, one more thing. You knew this already, but this podcast is presented for entertainment and educational purposes only. It is not meant as a substitute for the advice of a physician, a psychotherapist, or another qualified professional. Please take care of yourself.